don't know. Tim Walz is out there talking again.
You say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. That's what he said. I'm like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're
You were saying that men he worked with in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI because they believed he had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government?
They suspect that he did.
Suspected to the point that they went to the FBI.
And then China started producing almost a carbon copy of this military tank a couple of years later.
Come on. For real?
According to all of our research.
Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson just put Minnesota Governor Tim Walz on a one-way ride to Rose City, and it wasn't pretty. Rogan came in with pure disbelief and sharp humor, while Tucker cut through his policies like a chef who's not in the mood to be gentle. From pandemic mistakes to rising crime, they painted Walz as a walking mess, wrapped in polite incompetence. If weak leadership needed a face, this takedown made sure everyone now knows the name.
There's video of Tim Walz doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Exact same thing. And he said, of course, it's a Nazi salute. He said that.
Right.
We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction.
This is how crazy things have gotten. Like,
it's coordinated propaganda.
So who is Tim Walz exactly? Most of us, I just want to say I think he's should be investigated by the sex crimes unit. I really feel that way. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but he's one of the creepiest people I've ever seen. The vibe I get off that guy, I would not let him in my house. That's just my feeling. Maybe I'm being totally unfair.
Joe Rogan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, that doubtful look slowly taking over his face like he just heard someone claim a vegan burger tastes just like steak. The focus this time? Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Rogan didn't even try to hold back. He approached the situation with a combination of logic and disbelief. This wasn't going to be a light jab. It was shaping up to be a full-blown rant on government failure. And Tim Walz just happened to be the one in the spotlight.
you know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit like by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Like, wasn't she like a joke even among Democrats?
First, he went straight after Walz's pandemic record. Rogan let out a laugh, shaking his head like he was remembering a bad sci-fi storyline. He said Walz treated Minnesota like a giant experiment, trying to come up with the most confusing and restrictive set of rules possible. Small businesses were shut down, and schools stayed closed, but big box stores kept running. Rogan poked fun at the logic, questioning why small gyms were closed while liquor stores stayed open, joking that maybe Walz thought hall worked better than fresh air and exercise.
His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
And then came the mask mandates. Rogan rolled his eyes so hard it looked like he was trying to shake off a bad memory from school lunches. He described Tim Walz as if you were flipping through a rulebook written by online activists and out-of-touch officials who hadn't seen the real world in years. Rogan argued this wasn't leadership guided by science. It felt more like panic on display, with Walz in the lead role and the people of Minnesota left trying to figure out their part.
It doesn't bother me that much. If the people in Minnesota like it, who cares? It's just a star and some colors. The real problem is when you hear discussions of things that are openly Marxist philosophies, when you hear talk about equal outcomes and not just equal opportunity, but that we all need to arrive at the same place, equal outcome talk. There's only one way they can do that, and it's by forcing you.
Well, it's by everyone having nothing.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have things totally equal, because you can't have everyone have everything. That's impossible.
Right. There's no way. There's not enough resources.
And then came the riots. Rogan wasn't even frustrated. He was just stunned. The way Walz handled the George Floyd protests, and especially the violence that followed, left him almost speechless. For a brief moment, he reacted with the intensity of someone witnessing a dire situation unfold. Rogan said Minneapolis started to look like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie, and that Walz's response felt like standing back in shock while whole blocks went up in flames.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it.
First of all, kudos to CBS for allowing Governor Walz to quote Matthew 25:40 without interrupting him and saying, I'm sorry, that's an attempt at bringing in foreign disinformation campaigns. We can't accept that.
May those words burn on your tongue.
Right.
That's what I thought.
He said it felt like Walz was aiming for a record for the slowest response to unrest, like he was waiting for the fire to send a formal invitation before acting. Rogan joked that Walz didn't really govern, he just held press conferences and hoped things would settle on their own. To him, it didn't look like leadership. It looked like a substitute teacher trying to manage a chaotic classroom with nothing but a handout and hope. Then Rogan shifted to education, and that's where he really got going. He went after Walz's relationship with teachers' unions, joking it felt less like teamwork and more like one side calling all the shots. Schools stayed closed so long, he said, it felt like kids were completely disconnected from normal learning, while union leaders were treated like their word couldn't be questioned. Rogan laughed at the idea that public education had turned into something driven more by messaging than results. Then he moved on to crime, violent incidents, carjackings, and police morale, and didn't hold back. He argued that Minneapolis started to feel like a place where drivers had to think twice about safety and officers felt under constant pressure. He even painted a picture of Walz sitting in his office, calmly sipping coffee from a mug that says, "Please don't blame me," while neighborhoods struggled and people grew more cautious in their daily lives.
If someone is going to inherit your soul, they don't want it bogged down with bad habits.
Right. Yeah, well, they don't want it to be evil. They want it to have negative energy attached to it and the karma of killing a bunch of people.
Right.
Like, who wants Dick Cheney's soul? You know? The alien's like, you could have that, dude.
Remember when he shot someone and then the guy apologized to him? Isn't that nuts?
You know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit like to hell by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
And then, like a stand-up comic with a sharp edge, Rogan turned to Walz's public image. He said the person always looked like he was about to apologize for something he didn't fully understand. The tone, a body language, they didn't seem confident. It felt more like a shrug dressed up in a suit. Rogan joked that Walz looked like a middle manager stuck giving a disaster presentation while the building was already on fire. Then Tucker Carlson stepped in. If Rogan brought the sarcasm, Tucker brought precision. He didn't raise his voice or get dramatic. He just calmly picked everything apart with that steady, controlled delivery that makes it clear what's coming next. Tucker opened with one word: weak. He described Walz as an example of what happens when ideology takes over reality. In his view, Walz wasn't really governing, he was trying to manage emotions, avoiding offense, steering clear of conflict, and relying too much on safe, empty phrases. Tucker framed him as someone who mistook hesitation for compassion, someone who believed that waiting long enough to act somehow made the decision more meaningful.
I think it's fake. All of it.
Well, that Walz guy, I mean, I don't want to be too unfair because I don't know him and I don't have any hard evidence. He's a weirdo. That guy's weird.
He seems very
I'm
strange,
sorry.
yes.
There's something not right about that guy's personal life. So I hope I'm wrong because I don't want people like that with power. But most people I know with power in Washington have personal lives that would not withstand scrutiny.
Then Tucker shifted to Walz's response to the George Floyd protests, not focusing on sympathy, but on the total lack of leadership. He didn't criticize Walz for his compassion. Instead, he criticized him for his absence during the event. While people panicked, businesses burned, and the public begged for guidance, Walz hid behind empty statements and rehearsed grief. Tucker compared it to a ship captain giving therapy while the iceberg loomed ahead. Next came law and order, the core of his critique. Minnesota had become a testing ground for soft-on-crime policies, with Walz as the chief architect. Tucker painted him as a governor who let activist ideologies dictate public safety, while ordinary citizens suffered. Crime wasn't just numbers. It was families, livelihoods, and communities left in ruin because leaders were too afraid to call out wrongdoing. He listed failed reforms, ridiculed treating police like a necessary evil rather than protectors, and condemned Walz's surrender to the loudest, most extreme voices in his party. Tucker called it moral abdication with a press badge. Walz didn't protect people, he protected his image. Finally, Tucker turned to the economy. He argued Minnesota's tax policies under Walz were practically a guide for driving people out of state. The middle class was packing up, seeking lower taxes and a saner life. Meanwhile, Walz held rallies on economic justice, like he was starring in a documentary called How to Fail Upward. All while businesses left, regulations tightened, and infrastructure crumbled under his supposedly visionary leadership.
Tasked with choosing the new flag and seal made its final selections this week, and the new design will debut next year. It follows 4 months of meetings, many spirited debates, and 2,500 submissions from the public sharing their ideas for the new symbols.
This is why they changed it, he said it was problematic.
Problematic. Oh, I love that term. Our current flag is problematic. I think we all know that. We've evolved into a more diverse state, and I think it's more reflective of that.
Then Tucker turned to cultural issues, tearing into the absurdity of Walz's progressive stunts. He mocked how the governor treated Minnesota like a testing ground for every new woke trend, turning schools into experiments in confusion and government offices into activism hubs. Tucker contended that Walz prioritized performing for an elite online audience that misinterpreted chaos as courage over governing a diverse state. He criticized Walz's pandemic rules for being not only heavy-handed but also openly hypocritical, highlighting the differential application of regulations based on narrative fit. Peaceful protests were permitted, essential church services were limited, local businesses were closed, while Hollywood events were embraced. Tucker didn't just critique, he shredded the logic behind it. He even mocked Walz's delivery, saying statements were read like bedtime stories to a nervous public. It wasn't reassurance, it was infantilization. Citizens weren't looking for a life coach, they wanted a leader who could face fire, not sit beside it holding a feeling circle. Then Tucker landed the final blow. He said Walz was built for failure, in a time that demanded strength. A man skilled at sounding thoughtful while doing nothing, more focused on consulting with consultants than confronting reality. Minnesota didn't need a therapist, Tucker said. It needed a fighter.
But also, interestingly enough, he has a confession letter. This is what I would call it. It's a letter made out to the FBI to Kash Patel that says that Governor Tim Walz made him do this.
By the time Rogan and Carlson were done, Tim Walz wasn't just roasted, he was flambéed. One tore apart his logic with unfiltered mockery. The other dissected his reputation with surgical precision. Yet both landed on the same conclusion. Walz wasn't leading a state, he was managing decline. And the worst part, he didn't even seem to realize it. Rogan jumped back in, disbelief written all over his face. Like a man watching a magician saw someone in half, only to realize the person really had vanished. He hammered Walz's uncanny talent for dodging accountability, treating it like a competitive sport. Rogan said Walz could watch a city collapse in real time and still blame weather, miscommunication, or some vague societal failure that magically excused him. He likened Walz's leadership to a GPS that constantly recalibrates while you're trapped in quicksand. One moment, safety is the utmost priority. The next, a police department crumbles while he conducts diversity workshops amidst the turmoil. He painted Walz surrounded by advisors who seemed to have never seen the outside world long enough to understand the consequences of their own policies. Then Rogan went after his press conferences. He laughed at how Walz always looked ready to apologize for anything but somehow never accepted real blame. Rogan called it a masterclass in meaningless sincerity. Every speech a word salad of fear, indecision, and just a dash of smugness.
When he was running for Congress.
Well, there's more than one thing, too, right? He said he was a head coach.
Yeah, he was a head coach. He was
not a head coach. He was an assistant coach, which is an honorable thing. There's nothing wrong with being an assistant coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he also inflated his actual rank, right? He was slated to achieve a certain rank.
Right.
And how did it go? Like, he had to commit to the fact that he wasn't going to retire in order to achieve his...
Tucker, always armed with a velvet-gloved sledgehammer, turned the focus to Walz's obsession with consensus. He argued that Walz had turned governing into a group project where everyone gets a participation trophy and no one dares speak the truth. Minnesota wasn't struggling because of bad luck, it was struggling because of cowardice masked as diplomacy. Carlson noted that Walz never leads from the front. He waits for the loudest voices to dictate the pace, then shuffles forward with a nervous smile and a carefully scripted line. Tucker compared it to someone joining a parade halfway through, grabbing a megaphone and acting like they organized the whole thing. It wasn't leadership, it was opportunism, wrapped in khakis and awkward humility. And even then, neither of them was done.
But I think that, but I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in the state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of
he liked
and
it.
Support it, you know?
Well, yeah, did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
I did not see that.
Wow. The wife whose hand he shook?
Not even close. Rogan circled back to Walz's climate policies, calling them more for show than actual results. He mocked how Walz treated electric buses and solar panels like magic fixes for potholes and rising crime, even joking about Walz standing next to a wind turbine as if it could generate common sense. At the same time, Tucker focused on the state's rising taxes, saying Walz squeezed the middle class dry while handing out ideological participation trophies. He argued that under Walz, hard work was punished and virtue signaling rewarded. Both men agreed Minnesota had become a case study in how not to lead. Rogan with his disbelief, Tucker with surgical precision. They painted Walz not just as ineffective, but as a symbol of leadership that looks good on paper and collapses the moment reality shows up. And in this case, reality wasn't just knocking, it had kicked the door off its hinges.